And thank you for having us here today. We are proud to oppose, and we think the death penalty is absolutely justified, morally acceptable, and constitutional. I'm going to do a little extension of our side. But first, let me do a little refutation. I'll walk you through some facts that we think have been not actually walked through. So our first speaker over here, gave us a good history of the world. She actually talked about how executions are down. She defines capital punishment as, crimes that were aggravated, but we're going to stand here and show you actually that the majority of capital punishments are for people that murdered other people in premeditated homicide, right? So these are people that went out, thought about it, walked through the stages, and then murdered somebody else through their thought and their free will. And then I'm going to show you about how this trial actually worked out, right? And we can actually make sure that these people are fit to stand trial, that they're competent, that they're adults, that in the status quo that these are people that we think is fair to have the sentence to. So as I said, she showed us earlier that there's fewer that ever happen, and she talked about international countries, which we think this is obviously U.S. focused. Okay, and then the last speaker came up here and talked about how, they talked about the prison system, and they agreed with us about the moral contract, right? Social contract. So we are happy that we agree on that, but we have clearly stated that John Locke's social contract says that when you violate it, the government can do something with you, right? So the government can execute you or put you in prison. Either way, as Esther said, that you violated the contract, you know what that contract is because you're in our society, and so they conceded our point on this, that the government has the moral right and the moral capability to do that. So then, they talk about universal human rights, right? Well, we stand over here and kind of like laugh at that because the UN also in this same statute says that all people have a right to leisure and vacation, which we think is kind of silly because that's not really a human right. And like the UN has like Iran on the, Women's Rights Council, which is kind of, interesting. But the more important issue here is like the sovereignty for the U.S. Like clearly, as I'm going to talk about in a second, this is constitutional. So anyway, so the last speaker, they agreed with us, and they talked about the justice system. They called, physicians hypocritical. But these aren't physicians that are actually doing the execution. They're actually executioners who are the ones administering they're not abiding by the same thing. And that's actually an interesting story because obviously, nurses realize that, and so that's why they're not the ones doing the executions. So we don't think at that point. And then the whole like puking story with camp, like the Nazis, we think we're in America where we have a pretty good justice system where like, you have like rules and laws and like a government to protect you and give you equal justice under law. Like we think that that's pretty good ideals. We don't think that we have like random people out in, Hawaii executing other people at random, especially the government. So we don't think that it's appropriate at all to compare to us to, like foreign countries that are like executing those people at random. And then, it's next about the cost, and we're going to make the case over here about under our justice system, we think that those people deserve the cost, right? Because those suspects, the government has all suspects until they prove in a court, deserve that much money. They deserve those good lawyers. So let me do a little extension, right? So I'm going to talk about how the punishment fits the crime. I'm going to extend a little bit about what Esther talked about how the justice system is fair, and show you about that, about how states have the right to do this, and then how it's constitutional. So that's kind of like four main extension ideas. Right, so the punishment fits the crime. As I mentioned earlier, like they're over here and they haven't actually talked about this, but they're premeditated murders, right? So these are adults that are standing to fit trial, and they have to be shown that to be competent in court. So it's like not we're not executing like kids who have done this or like people that are mentally handicapped that so we think that the punishment fits the crime, right? And Esther laid this case that these are people clearly like that go out and snipe people, right, to cause mass terror in Washington D.C. and Virginia. Like these are people like Timothy McVeigh who hated the government so much that he bombed Oklahoma City, the building and the government building, and killed like hundreds of kids or dozens of kids. So, but the more important is like the justice system is fair, right? So when Timothy McVeigh went and bombed this building with a truck, right, he walked away knowing that he had committed this murder, right? That was the point. He actually was competent. He actually knew what he was doing. He was, had an IQ to do this. And so the court system prosecuted him, right? So we had the government come in and they arrested him. They had probable cause to arrest him. And then through a public court, right, which is a good system, when he was given a lawyer at his own expense, right, the government paid for his lawyer, and then they prosecuted him in court. They showed beyond reasonable doubt to 12 out of 12 jurors that he actually committed this. And he had a lawyer to defend himself. He had a lawyer to make sure the evidence was fair. And then the jury, 12 out of 12 people, said, yes, you deserve the death sentence. We could give you life in prison, but we're going to give you the death sentence. So we think like a trial by your peers, like a fair jury like this, is an acceptable thing in the status quo. And they talk about the many review processes, appeals, right? Most people don't actually, they die in prison because they have so many appeals. So So the states have the right to do this, right? And it's called federalism. So like the federal government can't come in and tell states what to do. You know, and only a few states have this. So, you know, you can move to another state if you really don't like this idea. Like if you're morally against time and protected time. So, you know, we think that that's an acceptable thing. Like in Hawaii, if you don't like that, you can move to another state. I don't know why I asked though, but I don't know. So, you know, in the Constitution, right, so the law of the land is defined by the United States Supreme Court, and they've clearly set precedent over time and time again that this is acceptable, that this is legal, that this is not cruel and unusual, like some would have you believe, and we think that's a good thing, right? So we think that they're over here as the federal government trying to ban it for all people. We think that we've made the case that the social contract is violated, and this is an appropriate punishment. We think the justice system is fair. I've clearly extended that, shown you how that works. And the states have the right to do this, and it's constitutional. So we clearly think that we've won this because we've given you evidence, we've shown you, we've walked you through this, and we've given examples of how this works and how the system is fair for everybody. So thank you for siding with us today.